Hey guys, tonight we're stepping barefoot into mud, water lapping at your ankles, dragonflies skimming low over green shoots, and frogs croaking as if they're auditioning for a midnight choir. The air smells heavy, a mix of wet earth and something faintly sweet from the young plants. You look around. There's no metal plow, no tractor in sight, just human hands, woven baskets, and the stubborn belief that food can be coaxed from swampy land. You're standing with some of the earliest rice planters in southern China, thousands of years ago. The truth? You probably wouldn't survive this lifestyle. Between the mosquitoes, the back-breaking labor, and the constant gamble with the weather, it's not exactly Airbnb material. But somehow, these communities pulled it off. And in doing so, they shaped history. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is. Are you sneaking in a midnight history snack or dozing off after breakfast in another time zone? Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey. Together, you trudge along the bank of a river that winds lazily through a green valley. The water moves slow, shallow, and brown, like tea someone forgot to stir. People are bent over in the shallows, pressing tiny grains into little squares of flooded soil. No seeds, no feast, so everyone works. Their clothes are rough fiber, sticking to sweaty backs, and their hair is tied up with reeds to keep it from trailing into the muck. This is southern China, around 10,000 years ago. The cradle of rice domestication. Mainstream historians pin the origins of rice farming right here, in the valleys along the Yangtze River. They point to charred rice grains found at sites like Hemudu and Pengtushan. Proof that human hands had already learned to tame the plant. But historians still argue whether rice was first cultivated in a single birthplace, or if multiple groups across Asia simultaneously experimented with wild varieties. Imagine two villages miles apart, both crouching by streams, scratching their heads and thinking, what if we water this stuff? But on purpose. As you watch, it becomes clear. Farming rice is an art of patience. The grain comes from wild Oriza rufipogon, a grass that once swayed freely in wetlands. Try eating it raw, and you'll break a tooth. Try planting it without water, and it dies. Yet the ancestors of modern rice farmers somehow cracked the code. Flooding fields to kill weeds, hand-picking seeds that clung better to stalks, gradually bending nature into something more cooperative. The sounds here are strangely soothing. Water sloshing as people step barefoot, birds shrieking overhead, and the rhythmic thump of wooden hoes breaking up clay soil. Your body aches in sympathy. You bend down, scoop a handful of mud, and realize this isn't just dirt. It's alive with wriggling worms, decaying leaves, and tiny bubbles of trapped gas. Every step squishes like stepping into a pie. And you thought treadmill workouts were tough. The rice planters don't just work, they celebrate. When someone finishes planting a patch, the neighbors splash them with muddy water. Kids run along the banks, making dragonfly catching contests into an Olympic sport. You almost get roped into one. But let's be real. Your hand-eye coordination against an insect that's basically a helicopter. Yeah, good luck. One quirky little fact. Early farmers sometimes kept ducks in the paddies. The birds happily munch on insects and weeds, doing pest control before pesticides were even a concept. Ducks got a buffet, rice got protection, and farmers got eggs. Win-win-win. Ducks waddling through fields, quacking like they're gossiping about everyone's planting technique. You can almost hear it. But there's a tension here too. Flooded paddies aren't just farms. They're battlefields against disease. Malaria thrives in standing water. People cough, children grow thin, and shamans beat drums. Convinced spirits have soured the fields. Historians still debate whether these early agricultural communities collapsed sometimes under the weight of disease before rice took firm root in culture. You shiver. Mosquitoes buzz around your ears, and you swat, suddenly thankful for your bug spray back home. Evenings are calmer. Families gather on woven mats, steaming bowls of cooked rice, balanced carefully in hands. The smell drifts, nutty, warm, and oddly comforting. Firelight flickers over faces, and people tell stories of the river goddess who taught them to plant. Rice isn't just calories, it's myth, identity, survival, all wrapped up in tiny white grains. You glance back at the fields under moonlight. Thousands of glowing fireflies hover like lanterns. The paddies stretch like mirrors, reflecting the stars. And in this shimmering, muddy reflection, you realize this is where it begins. Humanity's great love affair with rice, with farming itself, with shaping landscapes into bowls of sustenance. You stand in the wet field, mud between your toes, and you know life will never be the same again. You wake with the sunrise, not in a soggy Chinese valley this time, but high in the mountains of what will one day be southern Mexico. The air here is thinner, sharp, and cool, carrying scents of pine, damp stone, and freshly turned earth. The hillsides rise like green staircases, and you watch people scratching terraces into slopes with stone tools. Each shelf is narrow, stubbornly carved, and already sprouting rows of a plant you'll come to know very well: maize, corn's proud ancestor. At first glance, it doesn't look like the corn you see at a summer barbecue. This maize is smaller, the ears thin and uneven, with kernels that cling more like teeth on a broken comb than the neat rows you're used to. But to the people here, this is no flawed snack. It's survival, spirit, and the very rhythm of their lives. Mainstream archaeology places the earliest domestication of maize around 9,000 years ago in Mesoamerica. Scientists traced its lineage to a wild grass called teosinte, a scraggly plant that looks nothing like corn on the cob. Historians still argue whether teosinte was first tamed in one sacred valley, or whether groups scattered across Mexico were tinkering with it simultaneously, slowly coaxing kernels into something edible. Either way, what you're looking at here is an ancient agricultural experiment, one that will eventually spread like wildfire across 2 continents. The planting is more than work, it's ritual. Farmers press kernels into earth with fingers, then sprinkle ashes to feed the soil. Children scatter petals, as if bribing the gods with flowers. A shaman murmurs blessings, shaking a gourd rattle, because maize is not just food, it's flesh, the very body of humanity. In Maya myths, people themselves are created from ground maize dough, shaped like clay into living form. You look around at these farmers, and the weight of that belief hits you. Every seed planted is also an offering, a reenactment of creation. You step closer, and the soil is warm beneath your bare soles. It crumbles like chocolate cake, dark, with decomposed leaves. The terraces gleam with morning dew, each narrow ledge catching sunlight. You imagine how hard this must be. No tractors, no irrigation pipes, no bagged fertilizer from the store. Just rocks, sweat, and time. You probably wouldn't last more than 2 days here before begging for an air-conditioned cafe. Yet the people endure. They survive not just on maize alone, but on clever partnerships with other crops. Even here, beans twine their way up maize stalks like polite hitchhikers, and squash sprawls at the base, shading soil to keep moisture in. You don't realize it yet, but you're watching the beginning of the Three Sisters system. Corn, beans, squash. The ultimate squad goals of ancient farming. The smells are earthy and smoky because fires never really go out in these villages. Smoke drifts lazily from stone hearths, where yesterday's maize cobs roast on embers. Your stomach growls at the toasty scent. Someone hands you a flat cake, soft, warm, made of ground maize, and cooked on a clay griddle. You bite it, and the flavor is simple, slightly sweet, with a faint nuttiness. It tastes right, like something your body instantly recognizes as food, even if you're thousands of years out of place. And here's your quirky tidbit. Some of the earliest uses of maize weren't strictly for eating. Archaeologists found evidence of people grinding maize into a fine flour and fermenting it into a proto-beer. Imagine a group of ancient farmers, exhausted from carving terraces, kicking back with a gourd of foamy, slightly sour corn brew. Cheers, they might have said, though in their language, probably something like, to the maize that makes us human. Still, life isn't all feasts and beers. These hillsides demand constant maintenance. If rains come too hard, terraces collapse in muddy cascades. If rains fail, the maize shrivels into brittle stalks, and hunger looms. Historians still debate whether early Mesoamerican farmers moved often, chasing fertile soils, or whether they dug in stubbornly, patching up terraces year after year. Looking at the stone walls before you, patched with fresh mud and straw, you get the sense it was probably both, a mix of resilience and migration. Night falls here differently than in the rice paddies. Instead of fireflies and mirrored water, you see 1,000 stars scattered above, brighter than any city night you've ever known. Families gather around fires, roasting kernels until they pop. Yes, the earliest popcorn nights. Kids squeal when the cobs burst with sharp little explosions, kernels flying into the dark like edible fireworks. They munch happily, sticky with soot, while elders chant stories of maize gods who taught them to farm. You sit back, chew on a smoky kernel, and glance at the fields in starlight. Rows of maize sway in the mountain breeze like a living army. These humble ears will one day feed empires, inspire myths, and reshape continents. But for now, they whisper quietly in the wind, fragile yet determined. And as you drift in the warmth of the fire, belly full of roasted maize, you realize From muddy rivers in Asia to rocky slopes in the Americas, humanity is slowly weaving the same story, turning wild grass into destiny and seeds into civilizations. You blink awake, still hearing the echoes of crackling popcorn, but your feet no longer rest on dry terraces. Instead, they sink into sticky, squelching mud. The mountain breeze has vanished, replaced by thick humidity that clings to your skin like wet clothes you forgot to change out of. A dragonfly zips past your ear, followed by a mosquito that definitely has your number. Welcome back to the watery world of rice paddies. This time, closer to the ground, where tools and mud make the difference between famine and feast. People are scattered across a wide plain, a landscape that feels like a chessboard of flooded squares. Each patch is hemmed in by low earth ridges, barely ankle high, that corral water like makeshift bathtubs. The farmers here work not with fancy iron plows, but with stone blades, carved digging sticks, and baskets. You watch one woman plunge a pointed stick into the mud, twist it, and yank it free with a sucking sound, like uncorking a bottle of swamp. Into the hole, she presses a sprig of young rice, quick and careful, before moving to the next spot. Multiply that by thousands, and you start to grasp the sheer labor of early rice farming. Mainstream historians tell us that rice domestication required an enormous leap in persistence. Unlike wheat or barley, which grow fine in dry soil, rice insists on water, lots of it. Flooded paddies became the innovation. An accidental discovery turned deliberate system, drowned the fields, and suddenly weeds give up, while rice, that stubborn little plant, keeps thriving. But historians still argue whether these farmers figured this out on purpose after centuries of experimentation, or whether it was a happy accident of nature, seized upon and perfected. Either way, looking at the endless grids of watery fields, you realize this is humanity's first landscape architecture on a massive scale. The mud under your toes squishes unpleasantly, but the farmers seem unfazed. They move gracefully through it, balance honed by practice. Children join in, half playing, half helping, mud streaked up to their chests, laughing as they try to fling little clumps at each other. You feel a splat on your leg before you can dodge, and suddenly you're part of the game, whether you like it or not. Tools clatter. A man nearby sharpens a stone hoe by grinding it against another rock, sparks leaping. Another farmer uses a woven basket to scoop mud, reshaping the tiny ridges that keep the paddies from collapsing. Every sound blends into a strange music. Squelch, thump, splash, clink. It's not exactly a Spotify playlist, but there's rhythm in it. The rhythm of survival. And here's your quirky detail. Some early paddies were fertilized not with compost piles or manure, but with burned straw and even ash from cooking fires. Sprinkle it across the flooded soil, and the black flecks dissolve, feeding nutrients into the water. You watch as one farmer tosses handfuls of ash, and it swirls like ink in the shallows, tinting the field smoky gray. It's recycling, Neolithic addition. Meals here reflect the hard work. You sit cross-legged with a family as they share a pot of rice porridge, steaming and sticky. It doesn't look glamorous, basically mud-colored mush, but the taste is surprisingly comforting, soft warm, faintly nutty, and filling. They dip reeds into the porridge, scoop, and eat together, passing the bowl like it's treasure. Someone hands you a share, and for once, you're grateful the mosquitoes don't seem interested in stealing bites. But the work never ends. By midday, the sun is merciless, and the watery fields glisten like mirrors reflecting fire. Farmers wipe sweat with reed hats that flop comically, more like umbrellas than fashion statements. You shade your eyes and wonder how many hours you'd survive before collapsing into the mud. Honestly, not many. Historians still debate whether rice cultivation encouraged cooperation or sparked conflict. On one hand, whole communities needed to coordinate. Irrigation channels had to link paddies. Floodgates had to be opened and closed in sync, and planting schedules had to match. On the other hand, disputes over water and boundaries may have been some of humanity's earliest property wars. Looking at two farmers arguing at the edge of a field, one pointing angrily at a broken ridge, while the other pretends not to hear. You sense the seeds of both teamwork and trouble. Evenings bring relief. Villagers gather in clusters on raised platforms above the fields. The sun dips, turning the water bronze, while the air cools and frogs begin their symphony. You notice someone carving a stick into a flute, and soon a thin melody floats over the paddies, blending with croaks and splashes. It's hauntingly beautiful. Primitive, yes, but filled with the same yearning for music you hear in any age. And then there are the animals. Pigs snuffle along the banks, occasionally plunging into the shallows, squealing with delight. Ducks paddle gracefully between the rows, pecking at insects. Chickens cluck nervously, hopping from stone to stone, as if they know water isn't their element. It's a barnyard in a swamp, chaotic and hilarious. But somehow it works. The moon rises and the fields transform. What looked like endless mud by day now shines silver, each paddy a mirror reflecting constellations. Families sit together, bellies full of porridge, listening to elders tell stories of spirits who live in the water and guard the rice. A child gasps at a shooting star streaking above, and someone whispers that it's a sign of good harvest. You lie back, your head resting against a warm stone, and the night hums around you. Muddy, sweaty, and mosquito-bitten, you should be miserable. But instead, you feel strangely at peace. Humanity has found a way to bend earth and water to its will. Slowly, clumsily, but effectively. With stones, fire, and mud, they've unlocked a grain that will one day feed billions. The first thing you notice is the smell. Roasted squash, charred beans, and the sweet, nutty scent of maize tortillas drifting on the breeze. The second thing is the sound. Women singing softly as they grind maize on stone metates. Children giggling as they chase each other between the stalks. And the rhythmic thump-thump of feet stomping earth in dance. You've arrived in a clearing of early Mesoamerican fields, where three plants grow together in a partnership that would go down in agricultural legend. The Three Sisters. Corn stretches tall, its stalks like green spears reaching for the sky. Around those stalks, beans twine upward like vines looking for a hug, spiraling gracefully toward the light. At the base, broad squash leaves sprawl outward, shading the soil like living umbrellas. Together, these three crops create a natural farming system. Corn provides structure, beans fix nitrogen in the soil, and squash blocks weeds while keeping the ground moist. It's a prehistoric version of teamwork, way before corporate team-building retreats with awkward trust falls. Mainstream historians credit indigenous farmers of the Americas with developing this trio, a genius of intercropping that boosted nutrition and stabilized harvests. Archaeological evidence places this system as early as 5,000 years ago, spreading across Mesoamerica and eventually into North America. Yet historians still argue whether it was invented in one particular region and then diffused, or whether multiple farming groups stumbled upon the same brilliant combination independently. Looking around at these thriving fields, it's easy to believe either could be true. You crouch low, brushing your fingers over a squash leaf. It's cool and slightly prickly, with tiny hairs catching against your skin. The soil underneath is darker, damper, and richer than the exposed earth between fields, a living proof that this sisterhood works. You glance up at the beans, their pods dangling like ornaments, and then at the corn, already rustling in the breeze. The plants seem to whisper to each other, like siblings telling secrets, while the humans go about their chores. Meals here are colorful and plentiful. A family invites you to sit on a reed mat as they lay out bowls of mashed beans, roasted squash, and warm maize tortillas. You tear off a piece, scoop up beans, and bite in. The flavor is earthy, satisfying, and balanced. Protein from beans, vitamins from squash, and energy from maize. A nutritional trifecta that sustained whole civilizations. You realize you're eating not just dinner, but the blueprint of survival. Quirky tidbit time. Some early communities used dried squash shells as water containers, rattles, or even masks in ceremonies. Imagine sipping your daily water out of what looks like a jack-o'-lantern, or kids shaking gourds like makeshift maracas while running through the corn rows. Functional and fun. The fields are more than just farms. They're sacred spaces. Planting here is accompanied by rituals. Corn kernels sprinkled with incense. Squash seeds offered to the earth with chants. Beans blessed with songs. You hear a shaman declare that the sisters are not just plants, but guardian spirits, three divine women who must be honored. At festivals, dancers wear costumes of woven husks, leaping around fires to honor the trio. The night glows orange, the air thick with smoke and drum beats, as if the plants themselves are celebrated guests at the party. But it's not all harmony. The land is demanding. Droughts shrivel the squash, insects gnaw at beans, and storms flatten corn. Farmers hedge their bets by planting in diverse patches, spreading fields across valleys, so one disaster doesn't doom them all. Historians still debate whether such strategies reflect pure pragmatism or a deeper spiritual worldview. That scattering crops was as much about pleasing the spirits as outsmarting nature. You linger by the edge of the clearing at dusk. Fireflies blink in lazy arcs, echoing the sparks of campfires dotting the village. Children are already nodding off, bellies round with food, as elders tell stories of how the three sisters first came to Earth. According to one tale, The plants were once three women who quarreled constantly until the Creator bound them together, forcing them to live side by side. Now, when the wind rustles the leaves, it's said to be the sisters whispering, still bickering maybe, but also inseparable. You stretch out on a mat, warm tortilla in hand. The stars overhead, sharp and brilliant. The rustle of beans, squash and maize in the wind feels almost like a lullaby. And you realize, with the three sisters, humans have learned more than farming tricks. They've learned resilience, partnership, and the magic of letting different strengths grow together. You squint into the glare of the sun, and suddenly you're ankle deep again in the watery patchwork of rice paddies. But this time, something is different. Canals snake through the landscape, sluices creak open and shut, and villagers argue in raised voices over where the water should go. Welcome to the world of water wars and irrigation tricks. The unseen battles that shape the rice fields, just as much as mud and seed. The heat is heavy, pressing down like a damp blanket. You watch as farmers use wooden shovels, more like planks with handles, to scoop mud and reinforce the banks of their paddies. A boy runs by, carrying a gourd of water to his grandfather, who's sweating rivers while hammering a bamboo pipe into the ridge between two fields. With a quick twist, he diverts the flow of water from one square into another. It's not just clever, it's survival. Mainstream historical fact. The earliest large-scale rice irrigation systems date back thousands of years in East and Southeast Asia, with sites in the Yangtze Valley and later in northern Vietnam, showing clear evidence of canals, dikes, and water gates. These weren't small family hacks. They were community-scale engineering projects. But historians still argue whether such irrigation systems were always cooperative, or if they marked the beginning of centralized control, where powerful leaders or proto-states dictated who got water and when. Looking at the scowling farmers here, fists on hips, you suspect both are true. You trail behind the group, hauling baskets of mud on their shoulders. The baskets drip brown sludge down their backs, streaking their skin like war paint. They trudge to a weak spot in the canal wall and dump the mud, stamping it down with bare feet until the leak slows. You can almost hear the collective sigh of relief when the breach is patched. Water is life here. Too little, and the rice dies. Too much, and the field floods disastrously. The entire village teeters on that balance. One quirky detail: some irrigation channels doubled as fish traps. Farmers would guide water through small weirs where fish got caught, adding fresh protein to their rice-heavy diets. You catch sight of a kid gleefully pulling a wriggling carp out of the shallows, holding it up like a trophy. Dinner sorted. The soundscape is constant motion. Rushing water gurgling through bamboo pipes. The slap of mud against wood. Frogs croaking as if cheering the workers on. You wade in to help and nearly faceplant when your foot hits a hidden hole. Everyone laughs, and for a moment, the tension of water disputes melts away in shared amusement. You're muddy from head to toe now, but hey, at least you're part of the crew. As evening falls, disputes flare again. Two farmers yell across a canal, each claiming their field needs the flow more urgently. Elders step in, trying to mediate, while others suggest performing a small ritual to appease the river spirit. Historians still debate whether these conflicts were settled more often by diplomacy, ritual, or sheer muscle. From the look on the villagers' faces, you wouldn't be surprised if all three happened, depending on the mood. Dinner that night tastes like peace, at least temporarily. Steamed rice, roasted fish, and pickled greens spread across woven trays. The water that caused so much fighting now flavors the meal that brings everyone together. Children slurp broth, while adults sip fermented rice wine, laughter softening the edges of the day's struggles. You sip too, and the wine is sharp, earthy, and surprisingly strong, liquid proof that even stress can ferment into joy. Later, lying on the bank, you stare at the moonlit canals, cutting silver lines through the fields. The air is cooler, calmer, and you hear only the trickle of water, no shouting. You realize irrigation isn't just about engineering. It's about negotiation, ritual, and a delicate dance with both nature and neighbors. And it's this dance that will keep rice flowing through the centuries. The smell of incense hits your nose first, sweet, resinous, mingling with the earthy scent of ground maize. Then the sound, drums pounding steadily, voices rising in chant, and the rustle of husks woven into costumes. You've stepped into a Mesoamerican village during ritual time, and tonight, corn isn't just food. It's a god. The plaza is alive with color. At the center, a statue carved from wood and painted in bright pigments stands tall, a deity with maize ears sprouting from its head, its body adorned with feathers and jade. People approach carrying baskets of kernels, spilling them at the statue's feet in gleaming heaps of yellow, red, and blue. These aren't side dish kernels. They are sacred offerings, believed to sustain not only the community, but the very balance of the cosmos. Mainstream fact: maize held a divine role in Mesoamerican cultures, particularly among the Maya and Aztec. The Maya believed humans were literally made from maize dough, crafted by the gods after earlier attempts with mud and wood failed. Corn wasn't a crop, it was identity, life force, and destiny. The Aztec honored Sentiotl, the maize god, with festivals, dances, and yes, sacrifices. Yet historians still argue whether the ritual emphasis on maize arose purely from its nutritional centrality, or whether religion itself drove maize's spread and prestige. Was corn sacred because it fed bodies, or because people decided it was divine first? You wander through the crowd as the villagers prepare for ceremony. Young men wear headdresses shaped like corn cobs, their faces painted gold. Women balance clay bowls filled with ground masa, the dough steaming and fragrant. Children clutch ears of maize like talismans. You catch snippets of song, words rising in rhythmic cadence. Praises to the maize mother, thanks for the harvest, pleas for rain. Then the quirky detail catches your eye. Some people carry popcorn strings as decorations. Yes, popcorn, small cobs tossed on embers until kernels exploded, then threaded in the garlands to drape over altars. The idea of sacred popcorn might sound funny to your modern ears, but here, even snacks carry symbolic weight. You picture the gods munching along and can't help but grin. The ceremony begins with music. Drums thud like heartbeats, flutes shriek in piercing tones, and rattles shake like rain against rooftops. Dancers step into the plaza, circling the maize statue in spirals, their husk skirts swishing. They stamp their feet, arms raised, mimicking the growth of corn, seed to sprout, to stalk to ear. You watch, mesmerized, as the whole village becomes a living maize field in motion. But there's an undertone of tension, too. The chants aren't only gratitude, they're also desperation. This year's rains were late, and the corn stalks struggled. You hear murmurs about hunger if the gods aren't satisfied. The offerings pile higher, cobs, dough, even small figurines made of masa, like bargaining chips in a cosmic negotiation. Historians still debate whether such rituals were genuinely believed to control weather, or if they served more as social glue, binding communities together in times of uncertainty. Looking at the intensity in their eyes, you'd bet they believed with all their hearts. As night deepens, the fire blazes high, sending sparks swirling into the sky. The dancers leap through the flames, corn husks glowing ember red before turning to ash. The crowd gasps, then cheers, convinced the maize god is pleased. You feel the heat on your face, the ash settling on your arms like soft, gray snow. For a moment, you almost believe too. Afterward, food flows freely. Tortillas stacked high, tamales unwrapped from steaming husks, roasted cobs smeared with herbs. You bite into one, the kernels smoky and sweet, and realize this is communion, not bread and wine, but maize and fire. Everyone eats together, bound by the belief that they are literally eating themselves, reinforcing their identity as the maize people. Later, when the drums fade and the fires burn low, the plaza grows quiet. The statue of the maize god looms in the moonlight, kernels still glittering at its base. You lie back on the cool stone, belly full, ears ringing, and reflect. Corn here isn't just sustenance. It's sacred. It's story. It's the reason people gather, dance, pray, and believe. And tomorrow, when the sun rises, the maize fields will look the same, but you'll never see corn quite the same way again. The morning mist curls above the valleys, and as you walk with the people of this land, you notice something remarkable. Fields that don't belong to individuals, but to everyone. This isn't a patch of wild maize hidden in a forest clearing anymore. It's organized, planned, communal. You've entered a village in early agricultural Mesoamerica, where maize has graduated from wild grass to the backbone of civilization. And the way people tend it reveals as much about society as about farming. A row of men and women bend low, planting kernels in neat grids, their hands moving with practiced rhythm. They're not just scattering seeds randomly. They know the land, the cycles, the places where maize will thrive best. The children chase each other between furrows, carrying water gourds to splash the plants. At the edge of the field, a shaman murmurs a blessing, tying a strip of maize husk around a stick and planting it in the soil like a spiritual scarecrow. Mainstream fact: this organized labor reflects one of the great transformations of the Americas, the shift to sedentary agricultural societies. Once maize could reliably sustain large populations, people built permanent villages, complete with irrigation channels, storage pits, and ceremonial plazas. Fields were often worked communally, not privately, reinforcing the idea that maize wasn't just food, but a shared responsibility, as much cultural as agricultural. And here comes the quirky detail. These folks actually developed storage systems that doubled as pest traps. Granaries lined with clay not only kept maize cool and dry, but were designed with little ramps that lured rodents into jars they couldn't climb out of. Imagine a society where catching mice was part of the food security system. Clever and practical. And you can picture the kids sneaking peeks into those jars just to giggle at the trapped squeakers. But don't be fooled by the harmony of hoeing and planting. Archaeologists still debate whether this communal labor was voluntary or demanded. Some argue that early elites, chieftains, priests, or councils organized and enforced these planting schedules, turning maize into a tool of control. Was this really cooperative farming, or the birth of agricultural hierarchy, where failing to show up in the fields could mean losing your share of the harvest? The sun climbs, and you feel the sweat on your skin, the ache in your back. Farming maize isn't glamorous, yet when you look at the faces of the farmers, you see pride, even joy, because each stalk means life, each cob a safeguard against famine. And with maize, there's surplus. Surplus means more than just full stomachs. It means stored grain for winter, trade goods, and the freedom for some people to step away from fields altogether, to become artisans, warriors, or priests. In other words, maize isn't just sprouting plants here. It's sprouting whole new ways of life. At midday, the workers pause, gather under a shaded hut, and eat together. Bowls of atole, a warm maize porridge, pass from hand to hand. Stories mix with laughter. An elder recalls the lean years when the rains failed and maize dried up before it could ripen. Everyone grows quiet. The memory of hunger is never far. And then another story is told about the year the harvest was so bountiful, they carved images of giant cobs into stone, offering thanks to the maize gods. The contrast reminds you just how fragile and precious these fields are. As you wander back into the village, you notice more signs of maize's reach. Walls decorated with cob motifs, pots shaped like maize ears. Even lullabies mothers sing to babies mention maize, promising food, safety, and continuity. You realize maize isn't only in the soil. It's in language, art, and imagination. Evening falls. The villagers gather once more, not in ritual this time, but in simple companionship. Smoke drifts from hearts. Tortillas puff on flat stones. Laughter rings through the air. The fields outside rest in twilight. Silent soldiers lined in rows. Tomorrow, they'll need tending again. And the day after. And the day after that. You breathe deeply, taking in the scent of earth and roasted corn. In the rhythm of communal farming, in the rituals of planting and harvest, you see the beginnings of something monumental. Maize hasn't just domesticated people's stomachs. It's starting to domesticate their societies, shaping how they work, live, and dream together. You wake to the sound of drums. Not the warlike pounding you might expect, but a steady, deliberate rhythm that pulls the whole village together. It's planting season again, and this time, you're not just watching from the sidelines. You're swept into the heart of ritual. The maize here is no longer a plant alone. It's a god, a spirit, an ancestor. Every kernel has weight beyond food. Before a single stalk is sown, before a hand reaches into a seed basket, the villagers turn their attention to the plaza. There, at the center, a fire burns. Smoke curls skyward, carrying with it the aroma of copal resin. You hear chants rising, voices weaving together in patterns as old as memory. At the altar, a shaman sprinkles crushed maize meal into the flames. Sparks leap upward, as if the kernels themselves are eager to return to the sky. Mainstream fact: across Mesoamerica, maize became sacred, often personified in myths as deities like Hunhunahpu or the maize god. Entire cosmologies were built on the idea that humans were born from maize dough, their very flesh and blood shaped from the plant. This wasn't symbolic. It was a deeply literal truth. To them, without maize, there could be no humanity. Quirky detail. Some rituals included dressing maize cobs in tiny garments, wrapping them in woven cloth, and tucking them into baskets like infants. These cob children were sometimes cradled, sung to, even rocked to sleep. Think of it as the prehistoric version of doll play, except instead of toys, the babies were the very food that would keep you alive through the next year. But here lies the scholarly debate. Was maize worship primarily a grassroots expression of gratitude, or was it orchestrated by emerging elites to consolidate power? Some argue that rulers deliberately tied themselves to maize gods, positioning themselves as earthly mediators who controlled both crops and cosmology. Others suggest the reverence grew organically, springing from the soil up, from people who understood their survival as a fragile gift. As the ritual unfolds, dancers enter the plaza. Their faces are painted in yellow, white, and black, the colors of different maize varieties. They move in arcs, sweeping steps, mimicking the growth of stalks, reaching upward. You feel your own feet tapping to the rhythm, your body unconsciously aligning with the sway of theirs. The community isn't just watching, they're participating in a living drama that unites myth, agriculture, and identity. Later, when the seeds are finally sown, each hole in the earth receives not only a kernel, but also a whispered prayer. Some seeds are dusted with red pigment, others with ash. Small figurines are buried alongside them, tokens of fertility and protection. The act of planting itself becomes a reenactment of myth. Seeds as ancestors, returning to the underworld, destined to rise again in stalks of green. The day stretches on, work is balanced with ceremony, and when the sun sets, the people gather once more, this time for feasting. Tamales wrapped in husks steam in clay pots. Bowls of pozole, rich with maize and spices, pass hand to hand. Songs fill the air, praising both the gods and the humble cobs that sustain everyone. As you eat, you notice the careful weaving of maize, husks into mats, masks, and even toys. Maize isn't just food, it's art, craft, currency of meaning. Children play with husk dolls, mimicking the rituals they've just seen. The sacred bleeds into the everyday, and the everyday into the sacred. Night deepens. The fire in the plaza is still burning, though its crackle is quieter now. The last of the dancers sit, their paint smudged, their feet dusty. their eyes heavy. The shaman, voice hoarse, continues to chant softly, sending words into the darkness. You lie back, listening. The sound of wind through the fields is indistinguishable from the whisper of voices. You realize that here, in this place, maize isn't simply grown. It is remembered, sung, danced, painted, blessed. It is lived, and in turn, it lives through the people. The stars shimmer above, and you feel the weight of a truth settling over you like a blanket. Maize has become more than a crop. It has become a cosmos, a cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. To plant maize is to reenact creation itself. And tomorrow, when the first shoots push through the soil, it will be like watching the world begin again. You're jolted awake by the rustle of footsteps outside your shelter. It's still early, barely dawn, but the air buzzes with activity. Today isn't for planting or feasting. Today is for building. The villagers have decided to raise something new, a platform, an elevated space that will outlast seasons and storms. At first glance, it looks like a pile of dirt and stone. But listen closer, and you hear the intention in every strike of a digging stick, every thud of clay being tamped down. You realize you're witnessing the very beginnings of monumental architecture. Mainstream fact: the earliest Maya and other Mesoamerican communities began constructing earthen mounds, platforms, and plazas centuries before the towering pyramids we picture today. These early structures were often modest, flattened terraces for rituals, ball games, or gatherings. But they were revolutionary because they reshaped not just the landscape, but the very organization of society. Quirky detail. Archaeologists have discovered that some of these early platforms weren't just functional. They were cosmograms. Builders arranged them in ways that mirrored the cardinal directions or aligned with the rising sun at solstices. Imagine hundreds of people sweating under the sun, hauling baskets of soil, all so that the corners of their platform pointed exactly east and west. Precision wasn't a luxury, it was devotion. And here's the scholarly debate. Were these communal projects genuinely collaborative? Or were they early signs of emerging hierarchy? Some argue that entire villages pitched in, proof of egalitarian effort. Others point out that organizing hundreds of people for weeks of heavy labor suggests leaders, perhaps proto-chiefs, already calling the shots. In other words, was this teamwork or the first glimpse of top-down power? As the day unfolds, you find yourself drawn into the work. Children carry small baskets of earth. Adults form long chains, passing heavier loads from hand to hand. The rhythm is hypnotic. Dig, lift, dump, tamp. The mound rises slowly, layer upon layer, like a loaf of bread taking shape. At midday, the sun blazes directly overhead. Work pauses, and people gather in the shade of makeshift awnings. There's laughter, gossip, shared gourds of cacao drink. Someone cracks a joke about the mound being so tall it might touch the god's sandals. Everyone laughs, though their eyes flick to the growing platform with a kind of reverence. Maybe, just maybe, the joke isn't far from truth. By afternoon, the mound is no longer just a mound. Its edges are straightened, its surface smooth with clay. The top is wide enough for a gathering space, and already someone is marking out the corners for posts. Soon, a structure will stand here, perhaps a shrine, Perhaps a council house. Perhaps both. As the final layer of earth is tamped down, a ritual begins. The shaman arrives, carrying a bowl of maize gruel. He pours it onto the fresh surface, letting it seep into the soil. To feed the earth, someone whispers beside you. Then a bird is sacrificed. A small quail, its feathers shimmering in the fading light. Its blood stains the platform, sealing it in both life and death. When the sun sets, torches are lit. The mound glows with flickering firelight, casting long shadows across the plaza. People gather on and around it, singing and drumming, testing the acoustics of their new creation. The earth beneath your feet seems to hum, as if the mound itself has come alive, amplifying the heartbeat of the community. As you drift towards sleep, you realize this isn't just a pile of dirt. It's a statement. It says, "We are here. We shape the land. We mark the sky. We endure." Tomorrow, this platform will host ceremonies. One day, it might host rulers. And centuries from now, archaeologists will stand here, scratching their heads, marveling at how ordinary villagers once moved mountains, basket by basket. But tonight, under a sky of endless stars, you simply feel the earth beneath you, raised higher than before, carrying your body closer to the heavens. Morning breaks soft and gold, and for once, the village doesn't stir to the usual rhythm of grinding maize or stoking cook fires. Instead, all eyes drift toward the new mound, glowing faintly in the mist, as if it has pulled the dawn closer. People gather, not to build, but to play, because today, the mound isn't just a stage for rituals. It's the setting for something far stranger, far older. The ball game. At first, it seems harmless enough. A rubber ball, heavy and solid, is tossed between teams. They pass it with hips, knees, and elbows. Never hands, never feet. The crowd whoops with every strike, every stumble. Dust kicks up, sunlight glints off sweating skin, and the ball itself thuds like a heartbeat against the packed clay floor. Mainstream fact: the Mesoamerican ball game is one of humanity's oldest continuous sports, played for more than 3,000 years. It wasn't just entertainment, it carried religious, political, and cosmic significance. Some matches symbolize the eternal struggle between night and day, or life and death. Quirky detail: these weren't friendly backyard matches. The ball was made of solid rubber, sometimes weighing up to 9 pounds. Imagine smacking that thing with your hip repeatedly. Players wore a thick padding of leather and cloth to avoid cracked ribs or dislocated joints. Still, bruises were inevitable. Ancient sports medicine probably consisted of herbal poultices and sympathetic head shakes. And here's the scholarly debate. What did the ball game really mean? Some researchers argue it was purely ceremonial, with losers, or sometimes captains, facing ritual sacrifice. Others insist that many games were far less bloody, just community entertainment, or a way to resolve disputes without warfare. Was every match a fight for life? Or were most just sweaty, noisy fun? The truth may be both, depending on time, place, and stakes. As the game heats up, you see the ball curve through the air, glancing off a player's thigh before it bounces toward a stone ring set high on the platform wall. A collective, gasp. If the ball passes through, it's an instant victory, but it misses, landing in the dust with a puff. The crowd groans, then cheers anyway, because the struggle itself is the spectacle. You notice something curious. The chants from the crowd aren't random. They rise and fall in rhythm, almost like an invocation. The players, too, seem half entranced, their movements echoing patterns you've seen in the night sky. You realize this isn't just sport, it's choreography. Each strike of the ball reenacts the clash of the hero twins from Maya mythology, who once journeyed into the underworld to play against the gods of death. At the climax, one team lunges, deflecting the ball with a hip. It arcs perfectly, shreds through the stone ring, and disappears in a spray of dust. The crowd erupts, cheers, screams, pounding drums. Fire is lit atop the mound. Torches flare, and the losing team bows their heads. You wait for what comes next. Will there be sacrifice? Death? A grim silence. Instead, the losing captain steps forward, grinning despite the bruises on his chest. He presents a carved mask, his wager, and hands it to the victors. A laugh ripples through the crowd, followed by renewed drumming and dancing. For today at least, this game ends in glory, not blood. As night falls, the torches are relit around the mound. The players, bruised but grinning, sit on mats drinking frothy cacao, while children imitate their moves with smaller balls of clay. The air hums with excitement, as if everyone has touched something bigger than themselves. And you, watching the stars blink awake overhead, feel the echo of it too. That heavy ball, thudding against hips and knees, wasn't just a game piece. It was the sun, the moon, the balance of the cosmos. In every bounce and bruise, the universe itself had been played out before your eyes. When you finally lie down to sleep, the distant drumming still pulses in your chest. Tomorrow may bring farming, feasting, or even more building. But tonight, you drift off, knowing you've seen the first glimmers of sport, ritual, and theater, all rolled into one. And it began right here, on a platform of packed earth, under a sky that never stopped watching. Dawn creeps over the forest canopy, gilding the green with streaks of fire. Smoke rises lazily from hearths, and the village wakes with the familiar rhythm of maize being ground, dogs barking, and children chasing one another in the dust. But something different stirs today. A hush falls when a horn blows, deep, resonant, commanding. For the first time, you watch as people gather, not for farming or feasting, not for a ball game or ritual, but for something weightier: war. The village that once built mounds and played with the sunball has grown larger, stronger, more complex, and larger villages rarely live in peace for long. Across the valley, another community rises, with its own mounds, its own gods, its own pride. Borders are blurry, maize fields overlap, and soon the whispers of rivalry have sharpened into threats. Mainstream fact. By the classic Maya period, warfare was a constant, almost ritualized feature of life. City-states fought not only for territory and tribute, but also for captives, who played a critical role in religious ceremonies. Unlike wars of modern nations, many Maya conflicts were short, sharp raids, rather than total conquest. Quirky detail: Maya warriors went into battle adorned like peacocks, bright feathers, jaguar pelts, painted faces, obsidian blades glinting in the sun. They rattled shells, blew conch horns, and shouted insults across the field. The spectacle was as much about intimidation as it was about bloodshed. Imagine charging into combat, wearing a headdress taller than you are, fierce and fabulous. And here's the scholarly debate. What was the true purpose of Maya war? Some scholars argue it was all about captives, fuel for the sacred rituals of sacrifice, gifts for gods, symbols of victory. Others point to more practical aims, controlling trade routes, expanding farmland, enforcing tribute. Perhaps the Maya fought for both, blood for the gods and grain for the people. The preparations unfold before your eyes. Warriors daub black and red across their cheeks. Feathers quiver as they adjust headdresses. Obsidian blades gleam sharp enough to slice flesh like paper. Mothers tie charms around their sons' wrists. Old priests mutter prayers, scattering copal resin onto coals until sweet, choking smoke drifts across the square. Then the procession begins. Not quiet, not stealthy. Drums pound, shells roar, and the warriors advance in lines. Every footstep raising dust that glows golden in the sun. The air vibrates with anticipation, thick as storm heat. Across the valley, you see movement, another force, equally adorned, equally fierce. Banners snap, jaguar roars echo, and the two groups face each other across a stretch of trampled grass. For a moment, the world holds its breath, and then it erupts. Spears fly first, whistling through the air to thud into shields or ground. Shouts rise, bodies surge forward, obsidian blades clash with wood and bone. The sound is chaotic, raw. The crack of spear against shield, the yelp of pain, the shrill cries of conch horns. Dust swirls, feathers scatter, the sun glares down mercilessly. But you notice something strange. Many warriors aren't striking to kill. They parry, tackle, grapple, trying to drag opponents down alive. Capturing, not slaying. The real prize is not the enemy's blood spilled in the dirt, but the enemy himself, bound and alive. By midday, the fight slows. Captives, hands tied and faces streaked with sweat, are herded toward the mound. The victors lift their banners high, obsidian blades flashing, as women and children rush to greet them with cheers and offerings of food. Yet celebration is tempered. For the captives, fate is sealed. Some will be paraded, some forced into servitude, and some, perhaps, the most important, reserved for sacrifice. The gods must be fed, after all, and war has always been their favorite meal. That evening, the village square fills again, not with laughter, but with ritual. Fires blaze, drums thunder, priests chant. The captives, adorned now in borrowed finery, are led to the altar. Their faces are unreadable, defiant, resigned, maybe even proud. For in Maya thought, sacrifice was not humiliation, but transformation, a passage into divine memory. As the ceremony unfolds, you feel the crowd sway between fear and awe. War has brought maize, captives, prestige, but it has also brought blood, shadows, and a reminder that the gods are never sated. When night finally falls, you lie awake on your mat. The air is thick with the iron tang of blood. and the sweet smoke of copal. The stars above seem sharper, colder, as if they too have been sharpened by war. The mound that once echoed with games and laughter now glows with fire, a silent witness to battles fought in its shadow. And you realize that in this world, joy and terror are never far apart. War has arrived, and with it, the Maya world has changed forever. The drums have barely cooled from the war dances when a new sound rises in the Maya world. The chime of trade, the murmur of merchants, the laughter of strangers, speaking in accents thick with salt or jungle rain. If war is the rhythm of power, then trade is its melody. And oh, what a melody it becomes. You wake to the smell of cacao being roasted, dark, earthy, rich. Beans once ground only for household use now move in baskets across rivers, along forest trails, carried on the backs of men who walk for days. In some villages, cacao isn't just a drink, it is money itself, more precious than jade, more portable than maize. 10 beans might buy a rabbit, 100 a fine cloak. Merchants count their wealth, not in gold, but in chocolate. Imagine paying taxes with hot cocoa. It sounds delightful, until you remember those beans are worth more than your hut. Mainstream fact: trade in the Maya world connected distant lands into a web of exchange. Jade from the Motagua Valley, obsidian from highland quarries, feathers from tropical birds, salt from coastal pans, and cacao from the fertile lowlands. All of it moved in steady flow. These were not random exchanges, but carefully managed networks, feeding not just kings, but also the households of artisans, scribes, and farmers. Quirky detail: the Maya adored feathers, bright, impossible feathers from quetzals, parrots, macaws. A single shimmering quetzal plume might travel hundreds of miles, stitched into the headdress of a lord who would never once set foot in the jungle, where the birds sang. One Spanish chronicler later gasped that the sight of Maya nobles at a festival was like a walking aviary. Imagine strutting into your village meeting, looking like Big Bird, but dead serious. And here's the scholarly debate. How centralized was Maya trade? Some argue powerful kings controlled everything, sending emissaries and taxing every basket of salt. Others suggest much of it was independent, handled by merchant guilds and wandering traders who answered more to profit than to palaces. Did trade build kingdoms? Or did kingdoms simply feed off trade? The truth might lie in the middle, where both palace and path shaped the economy. The roads hum with movement. You watch lines of porters shuffle under heavy loads, their backs bent but steady. Canoes slip down rivers, sleek and silent, piled high with goods. In bustling marketplaces, stalls overflow with clay pots painted in swirling patterns. Obsidian blades sharper than steel, embroidered textiles that shimmer in the sun. The air is thick with voices bargaining, laughing, cursing, singing. You drift among the stalls, and the world feels suddenly larger. A man tells you of mountains taller than clouds, where the air is so thin your chest aches. A woman sells salt and speaks of a coast where the sea stretches endlessly, full of fish that gleam like silver coins. Another merchant offers you dried fish and cacao, explaining that he walked for weeks, guided only by stars and stories. The marketplace is not just about things, it is about ideas. Here, gossip carries as much value as jade. Who won the last ball game in the next city? Which king is building a new temple? Whose daughter married whose son? Even the gods seem to travel here, whispered in foreign prayers. One day, a caravan arrives bearing something new. Copper bells, gleaming and musical, strange to Maya ears. The merchants explain they come from lands far to the west, beyond the mountains, beyond even the memory of your elders. The bells ring softly, their tone unlike any conch or drum. People gather to listen, wonder lighting their faces. The world has stretched again. Even the sacred is caught up in this flow. Priests eagerly seek rare resins for incense, shells for rituals, obsidian for offerings. When they burn copal, when they paint codices, when they carve jade, they are telling stories not just of gods, but of connections between places, people, and power. But trade is never just smooth. With wealth comes envy. With goods come taxes. Kings grow fat on tribute, and merchants sometimes bristle under their control. Some routes become dangerous, patrolled by raiders, or threatened by rival lords. Wars may begin, not over maize fields, but over who controls a port or a mountain pass. As twilight deepens, you sit in the square, sipping bitter chocolate thickened with maize. Around you, voices still buzz, coins clink, beans change hands. You realize this market is more than trade. It is a heart pumping life through the veins of the Maya world. Every plume, every pot, every bean carries not just value, but a story. And you wonder, is it war that drives kingdoms forward? Or is it trade? Perhaps the truth is that both blood and cacao, feathers and obsidian are threads woven together in the fabric of this civilization. When you lie down to sleep, the faint scent of cacao lingers in your breath. Above you, stars gleam like jade beads strung across the night. Tomorrow, more caravans will arrive, more goods will change hands, and the Maya world will spin faster still. The clatter of trade fades into the hush of forests and the shimmer of stone. You're standing now before something different, something less about goods moving and more about gods watching. For the Maya, the gods are everywhere, in the trees, in the rivers, in the maize that bends heavy in the fields. But here, in this city, they rise from the ground itself, carved in stone, painted in red, perched high above in temples that kiss the clouds. You walk into a plaza so wide, it feels like the sky has been pulled down to rest upon it. The stones under your feet are warm from the sun, smooth where thousands of sandals have passed. A pyramid rises before you, tiered like a giant staircase, each step steep enough to make your knees quiver just from looking. Priests in feathered cloaks climb those steps, carrying bowls that smoke with burning copal resin. The scent is sweet and sharp, rising in lazy spirals toward the heavens. Mainstream fact: Maya religion was polytheistic and deeply tied to cycles of nature. Every god had a domain: Chak, the rainbringer; Yumil Kaksob, lord of the maize; Kinich Ahau, the blazing sun. Life itself was imagined as a fragile balance between worlds: the sky realm above, the earthly middle, and the watery underworld of Xibalba below. To keep this balance, humans had to feed the gods, not with sermons, but with offerings of food, incense, blood, and sometimes even lives. Quirky detail. Not every ritual was grim. Some ceremonies involved feasting, drinking frothy cacao, dancing until dawn, and even sporting contests. One inscription mentions a king holding a festival where people drank so much they had to be carried home. It seems the gods appreciated a good party as much as a good sacrifice. And the scholarly debate, just how much human sacrifice really occurred in Maya culture. The Spanish, eager to paint the Maya as a bloodthirsty, claimed rivers of hearts were spilled daily. But the evidence suggests sacrifice, while present and powerful, was rarer and more symbolic than these lurid accounts suggest. Bloodletting by rulers, piercing their tongues or ears to offer drops of blood, may have been more common than large-scale sacrifice. Still, when drought came or wars raged, the need to feed the gods could turn grim indeed. You're led into a smaller courtyard beside the pyramid. A stone stela rises from the earth, tall and narrow, carved with the likeness of a king wearing a headdress that looks like an entire bird exploded into feathers. His eyes are wide, his lips firm, his hands clasped over a serpent bar that rides in stone. Hieroglyphs march down the sides, their curls and hooks like secret songs frozen mid-verse. A scribe nearby dips a brush into red pigment, repainting the glyphs to keep them alive. The priest beside you explains, the stela isn't just decoration, it's a story. It records when the king was born, who his mother was, when he took the throne, and which gods watched over him. History and myth intertwine here. What is real? What is divine? What is propaganda? You're not sure, and maybe neither were the Maya. Then the drums begin. Low, booming, steady. Shell trumpets answer, their calls hollow and strange. Dancers in jaguar skins leap into the plaza, feathers trailing, faces painted with stripes of red and black. Their movements are sharp, jagged, half human, half animal. You feel the ground vibrate as feet stamp and voices rise. In the middle of it all, a priest takes a stingray's spine and presses it to his tongue. You flinch as he draws it across, blood dripping into a paper bowl. The paper is burned, the smoke carrying his essence upward. The crowd gasps, not in horror, but in awe. The gods are being fed. The world is being renewed. Night falls, but the rituals don't end. Torches flare, throwing long shadows up the pyramid steps. You see the stars wheeling overhead, and you realize, for the Maya, these stars aren't just decoration. They are guides, gods, ancestors. Priests crouch with bark paper codices, tracing the paths of Venus, the sun, the moon. When Venus rises, wars are planned. When eclipses come, the people tremble. You lie on your back in the plaza, stone still warm beneath you. Smoke drifts across the stars, the smell of copal mingling with sweat and song. The chant of priests blends with the chirp of night insects, and you think, this isn't just religion, it is theater, astronomy, politics, all braided together. The gods live here, not as distant figures, but as daily companions. They breathe in the incense, dance in the feathers, hide in the maize stalks, burn in the torches, and you, just for a moment, are part of their endless cycle. Sky, earth, underworld, life, death, rebirth. You close your eyes as the drums keep beating, steady as a heart. Morning arrives with a glow that filters through the jungle canopy and spills into the city like liquid gold. You stretch and shake the dust from your tunic, blinking as you notice the city around you already buzzing. Markets hum, children laugh, and women carry baskets balanced on their heads with the ease of dancers. But today is different. Today is not about trade or temples. It's about the game, not just any game. The ball game, the sacred sport of the Maya. You're led through narrow streets until the walls open into a long stone court, wider than any alley and flanked by towering slanted walls. Each wall holds a single stone ring, carved from rock, placed impossibly high, as if the builders were daring the players to attempt the impossible. The court floor is smooth, hard-packed stone, gleaming in the sunlight. Spectators gather along the edges, leaning forward with restless excitement. Some bring gourds filled with pulque. Others wave fans of woven palm to push back the heat. At the far end, nobles sit beneath shaded canopies, their headdresses heavy with jade, while priests stand solemnly, clutching bundles of incense. The game isn't just entertainment. It's politics, religion, and destiny, all rolled into one bouncing ball. Mainstream fact. The Maya ball game, known as pits in their tongue, was more than sport. It symbolized the struggle between day and night, life and death, order and chaos. The ball itself, solid rubber and heavy, represented the sun as it moved through the heavens. To keep it in play was to keep the universe alive. Quirky detail. The ball was so dense it could bruise or even break bones. Players wore thick leather belts, padded hip guards, and knee protectors. Why? Because they weren't allowed to use their hands or feet. Only hips, thighs, shoulders, and chests could strike the ball. Imagine trying to keep a 20-pound rubber boulder bouncing with your hips while a crowd screams at you. It's like soccer, volleyball, and sheer madness fused together. And the scholarly debate. What about the famous tales of losers, or sometimes winners, being sacrificed after the game? Spanish chroniclers swore by it, describing bloody ends to sweaty matches. But archaeologists argue that while sacrifice may have been tied to certain ritual games, it wasn't the everyday outcome. Some games were entertainment, some were wagers, and some, rare, ceremonial matches, decided the fate of captives or marked major cosmic events. The truth likely lay somewhere in between. Most games ended with nothing worse than a sore hip, but occasionally, the stakes could indeed be life or death. The game begins. Two teams stride onto the court, their bodies painted, their belts thick, their eyes sharp with concentration. A priest blesses the ball with smoke, mutters prayers to the gods of the underworld, then tosses it high. It falls with a dull thud, bouncing with surprising spring for such a heavy thing. The crowd roars. The players dive into action. One swings his hip and sends the ball hurtling across the court. It slams against the slanted wall, ricochets upward, and is caught by another player's thigh before it hits the ground. You flinch each time it smacks against their bodies, imagining the bruises already forming. Sweat pours down their painted skin, and the rubber shines as it bounces from hip to hip, never touching the forbidden ground. The crowd is alive, cheering, jeering, gasping as near misses send the ball skimming just shy of the stone rings. Children shout the names of their favorite players, while elders watch with the same solemnity they'd give a temple ritual. And in a sense, that's what this is. Ritual. A living drama of cosmic balance. Minutes turn into an hour. The heat rises. One team falters, a player stumbles. The ball nearly slips from play. But then, with a burst of energy, another player twists his body, drives his hip upward, and sends the ball soaring. Time slows. You watch as it arcs, perfectly aligned, and slams through the narrow stone ring with a thundering bounce. The plaza explodes. Cheers shake the sky, drums thunder, trumpets blare. Nobles clap, priests raise their arms, and the players lift one another high in triumph. You can almost feel the gods themselves nodding in approval. Order restored, balance upheld, the sun rolling onward. Then the festival begins. Markets spill into the court, vendors rushing to sell tamales, cacao drinks, roasted maize. Musicians strike up rhythms, and dancers whirl with feathers streaming. The players, bruised but jubilant, are treated like heroes. Children crowd around them, imitating their moves, dreaming of one day stepping onto that sacred stone court. You sip a gourd of cacao, thick and slightly bitter, and glance at the ball sitting nearby. Its surface is pitted from hours of play, heavy as stone when you lift it. You try bouncing it once, nearly dropping it as the shock rattles up your arm. You shake your head. How did they do that for hours? But then you realize this wasn't just endurance. It was faith. Every thump of that ball against a hip or a wall echoed the heartbeat of the cosmos. Every cheer of the crowd was a prayer. Every bruise a reminder that keeping the world in motion sometimes hurt. As night falls, torches light up the court, and the festivities stretch on. The ball lies silent now, but you feel its weight in your hand. A miniature sun, waiting for the next day, the next ritual, the next desperate battle between night and day. You breathe deep, the air thick with smoke and laughter. And for the first time, you understand. For the Maya, sport was never just play. It was life, death, and everything in between. The ball court still lingers in your thoughts the next morning. But today, your path leads not to sport, but to ceremony. The air is heavier than before, laden with the scent of copal incense, roasted cacao, and something else, something metallic and sharp. You can feel it in your throat as you walk. Today is a day of sacrifice. The plaza is filled. Nobles sit in tiered wooden platforms shaded by woven mats. Commoners gather shoulder to shoulder, and priests in dazzling feathered robes stand ready at the base of a massive pyramid. The temple rises above everything, its stairs steep, its summit crowned by a sanctuary where the gods wait. The crowd hushes as the drums begin, slow at first, each beat echoing like a heartbeat across the plaza, then faster, more insistent. Shell trumpets join in, long notes that seem to tremble in your bones. The air thickens with the perfume of burning resin as smoke curls upward in pale, ghostly shapes. Mainstream fact: Maya human sacrifice was deeply tied to their religion. They believed that blood was the most sacred substance, the very fuel of life, and that the gods themselves had sacrificed their own blood to create humanity. To return blood to the gods was to keep the cycle alive. Not all sacrifices were the same. Sometimes it was animals, sometimes offerings of food or incense. But in moments of great need, after droughts, during wars, or at grand rituals, humans gave their blood, their breath, and their lives. Quirky detail: not all sacrifices were bloody deaths. Nobles and even rulers sometimes performed ritual bloodletting on themselves, piercing their tongues, ears, or even genitals with obsidian blades or stingray spines. They would collect the blood on paper and burn it as an offering. Pain was prayer, and endurance itself was proof of devotion. Imagine your king casually threading a rope of thorns through his tongue while the people cheered. It happened, the scholarly debate: how frequent and widespread were full-scale human sacrifices in the Maya world? Spanish chroniclers, eager to paint the Maya and Aztecs as savage, described endless blood-soaked ceremonies. But archaeology suggests a more nuanced truth. Yes, sacrifices happened, but often they were highly symbolic, reserved for special occasions, or limited to war captives and elite rituals. Some cities may have done it more than others, and some evidence points to a stronger emphasis on bloodletting and symbolic offerings over mass killings. The Maya weren't staging daily gore fests. They were sustaining a cosmology the ceremony builds. From the edge of the plaza, captives are led forward. Their bodies are painted, their faces marked with chalk. Some walk with bowed heads, others with fierce defiance. Warriors of the city display them proudly. These are the fruits of conquest, the gifts to the gods. The priests chant, voices rising and falling like waves. They lift bowls of cacao and maize, scattering kernels across the stone steps. Incense spirals upward, carrying prayers to the heavens. Then the climb begins. The captives are led up the pyramid steps, each one flanked by masked attendants. The drums quicken, the trumpets howl. The crowd murmurs prayers, some with tears, some with awe. At the summit, the sanctuary glows with torchlight. You can barely see from below, but you know what awaits: a stone altar carved with serpents, jaguars, and the faces of gods with hungry mouths. The priests will offer hearts, still beating, to fuel the sun's journey across the sky. The crowd gasps as the first cry pierces the night. It echoes across the plaza, sharp and sudden, and then it is swallowed by the rhythm of drums. The priests raise something crimson to the sky, and for a moment it catches the torchlight like a jewel. The people bow, murmuring thanks, their bodies pressed to the stone. But not all offerings are so final. Down in the plaza, nobles kneel as attendants approach them with obsidian blades. You watch, breath caught, as one man calmly pierces his ear, the dark blood welling out and dripping onto paper strips that are gathered carefully. Another, a priest with a headdress taller than you are, shreds a stingray spine through his tongue, grimacing only slightly, before letting the blood fall into a burning bowl. The flames flare bright, and the people cheer. The gods are pleased. Hours pass in this cycle of chant, music, and offering. The air grows dense with smoke, sweat, and the iron tang of blood. Yet there is no chaos, no frenzy. Everything is deliberate, measured, sacred. This isn't cruelty for cruelty's sake. It's devotion, woven into the very structure of the world. As dawn approaches, the drums slow, the incense burns low, and the plaza falls silent. The sacrifices are complete. The captives' bodies are taken away, some to be buried, others, perhaps, to be displayed as warnings or honored as divine gifts. The nobles descend the pyramid, their faces pale but serene. The crowd disperses slowly, whispering prayers of gratitude as they go. You stand a long moment in the emptying plaza. The smell of smoke clings to your clothes. The echo of drums still in your chest. You feel unsettled, both disturbed and awed. To the Maya, this was necessity. Without it, the sun might not rise, the rains might not come, the world might crumble into chaos. And so, with blood and breath, they stitched the universe together. The days after the sacrifice feel quieter, almost reverent, but Maya life is never still for long. The plaza clears, the incense fades, and now another kind of offering takes the stage, the feast. Because where there is devotion, there is celebration, and where there is celebration, there is food. The marketplace comes alive with smells that pull you like a rope through the streets. Smoke curls from clay hearts, carrying the rich aroma of maize tamales wrapped in green leaves. Clay pots simmer with stews of beans, pumpkin, and peppers. Someone grinds cacao beans on a flat stone, the rhythmic scraping a kind of music. And soon, the scent of chocolate, bitter, thick, spiced with chili, hangs in the air. Your stomach growls so loudly, a passing vendor smirks at you. Mainstream fact: maize was the foundation of Maya diet, culture, and even religion. Their creation myths said that humans were fashioned from maize dough, making corn not just food, but identity. Nearly every meal involved it: tortillas, tamales, atole, a kind of hot maize drink, or gruel. Add beans, squash, and chili, and you had the three sisters, the holy trinity of agriculture that sustained much of Mesoamerica. Meat was rarer, though turkey, venison, duck, and fish made appearances, especially at feasts. Quirky detail: chocolate wasn't sweet. Forget your cozy mug of hot cocoa. Maya chocolate was spicy, bitter, and foamy. They frothed it by pouring it back and forth between vessels from a height, creating a rich head of bubbles that people adored. If you had status, you might drink it with honey or flowers mixed in. If you were a warrior or noble, you might even drink it with blood, blending nourishment with ritual power. The scholarly debate: how much cacao was truly available to commoners? Some evidence suggests that chocolate was mostly reserved for elites, warriors, and rituals, given its value as currency. Yet residues in humble pottery suggest ordinary people may have enjoyed it, at least on special occasions. Perhaps chocolate was like fine wine today, rare, symbolic of prestige, but not entirely out of reach for festival days. The feast unfolds in waves. Women bring steaming baskets of tamales stuffed with beans and herbs. Roasted peppers sizzle on clay griddles, filling the air with smoky sweetness. A great cauldron of stew is ladled into clay bowls, thick, savory, with chunks of turkey leg floating in the broth. Children dart through the crowd with sticky fingers, clutching roasted squash seeds that crackle between their teeth. Then comes the drink, Gourds of balche, a fermented honey and bark brew, make their rounds. It's sweet, tangy, and slightly sharp, leaving a warmth in your chest. Some drink it quickly and laugh too loudly. Others sip carefully, murmuring prayers with each swallow. The cacao is brought out with ceremony, thick and foamy, poured from painted vessels into small cups. Nobles drink it slowly, savoring the bitterness, while commoners watch with a mix of admiration and envy. As the sun sets, music rises. Drummers strike deep rhythms, flutes trill, and dancers step into the plaza with painted faces and feathered headdresses that shimmer in the firelight. They move in lines and circles, imitating jaguars, eagles, and serpents, each step a story, each gesture a prayer. The people clap in time, the children mimic the moves, and laughter swells alongside reverence. You're swept into the dance, almost without realizing it. A hand pulls you forward, and suddenly you're stepping clumsily in rhythm, circling with strangers who grin and cheer you on. The drums quicken, your feet stumble, and you nearly trip into someone holding a tray of roasted turkey legs. They laugh, shove one into your hand, and suddenly you're both eating and dancing. Grease running down your fingers. The night stretches long. Stars bloom in the sky. Torches flare in the plaza, and the celebration becomes both earthly and divine. For the Maya, feasting wasn't just indulgence. It was communion, a way to bind people together and honor the gods who made food grow from the earth. Every bite of maize was a reminder. We are made of this. By the time you stagger away, belly full, ears ringing from drums, lips still tingling from chili and cacao, you feel something deeper than just satisfaction. You feel woven into the rhythm of Maya life. Food, like blood, like dance, like prayer, is part of the great cycle. Tomorrow, the fields will call again. But tonight, the gods are full, the people are full, and the world feels whole. The feast is over, the fire pits are ash, and the echoes of drums have faded into the forest. But if you thought the Maya were done celebrating, think again. Their world was not just feasts and fields. It was also a calendar of ceremonies. Life moved to the rhythm of rituals. And today, you wake to the pulse of another. This time, the focus isn't sacrifice or feasting, but the turning of time itself. Because the Maya were obsessed, not just mildly curious, not just casual, obsessed with calendars. To them, time was alive, a living force with its own gods and personalities. Every day was not only a date, but a spirit with moods, fates, and warnings. Mainstream fact: the Maya used multiple calendars at once. The Hab, a solar calendar of 365 days, kept track of agricultural seasons, planting, harvesting, rain, and drought. The Tzolk'in, a sacred calendar of 260 days, mapped spiritual cycles, births, and rituals. Together, they formed the calendar round, a repeating 52-year cycle. Layer on top the long count, which stretched back thousands of years. And you have one of the most sophisticated timekeeping systems in the ancient world. Quirky detail: babies were often named after the day of the Tzolk'in on which they were born. If you popped out on 4-eek, your name might literally be 4-wind. That meant your destiny was tied to that day's spirit. Imagine your whole life shaped by cosmic scheduling. Sorry, can't help being stubborn. I was born on 9 Jaguar. The scholarly debate. Did the Maya really predict the end of the world in 2012? The famous long count date, December 21st, 2012, marked the completion of a great cycle, a Baktun. Some scholars argue it was never about apocalypse, but about renewal, like turning the page of a cosmic calendar. Others suggest the inscriptions hint at celestial events or political propaganda tied to specific rulers. What is clear is that the Maya didn't think the universe would simply stop. They saw time as a wheel, endlessly cycling, not a line with a full stop. In the city plaza, people gather before a towering stela carved with glyphs and numbers that dance like snakes. Priests, their faces painted black and red, pour incense on the coals, sending curls of white smoke toward the sky. The crowd murmurs as the priest chants the count of days, his voice carrying like a drumbeat through the plaza. Each syllable is not just a word, but an invocation, keeping time alive. You feel the weight of it. Time isn't background here, it's center stage. The people bow, not just to gods above, but to the gods of days. Today is not just today. It is 9 Kan, or 4 Ik, or 13 Aja, each combination loaded with personality and prophecy. A farmer listens closely, because planting corn on a bad day could doom his harvest. A woman, cradling a newborn, waits to hear if her child's birthday promises a path of fortune, danger, or greatness. The rituals intensify. A priest cuts open a gourd filled with colored maize kernels, shaking them into a bowl and interpreting their patterns like cosmic dice. Another consults a bark paper book, its painted glyphs alive with stories of gods and past cycles. The drums start again, slow and steady, marking the heartbeat of the universe. You glance around. The marketplace stalls are quieter than during the feast, but not silent. Vendors still sell honey, salt, and cacao beans, but most eyes are on the plaza, where time itself is being named, shaped, and offered to the gods. The smell of copal resin thickens the air until it stings your nose, and you realize this isn't just ceremony, it's cosmic maintenance. If the Maya didn't do this, maybe the sun wouldn't rise, the maize wouldn't grow, or the rains wouldn't fall. The priests chant louder, their words rising into the sky, as if to remind the gods, we are still here, and so is time. Fire is lit, blood is offered, smoke curls upward, and the crowd responds with murmurs of awe. As night falls, the stars emerge in a dome so clear, it feels like you could pluck them from the sky. The people point out constellations, each one tied to myth and omen. The Milky Way isn't just stars, it's the celestial road of spirits, the path the dead travel, and the gods patrol. Venus, the morning star, blazes brightly, and a hush falls over the crowd. Priests whisper, its rising marks a time of war. You shiver, not from cold, but from the sense that you're standing inside a clock, inside a story that never stops. Every drumbeat, every flicker of firelight, every glyph carved into stone is part of a wheel turning endlessly. Tomorrow, people will still plant maize, still grind cacao, still laugh and argue. But tonight, They've reminded themselves, time isn't theirs. Time is a god, and they are only dancers on its stage. The night of chanting and incense drifts away, but you don't get long to bask in cosmic wonder. Dawn breaks sharp, painted in pink and gold across the jungle canopy, and the city is already stirring. Priests may read the heavens, but another sort of power pulses beneath it all. Politics. Because for the Maya, life wasn't just about maize fields and calendar wheels. It was also about kings, queens, alliances, and betrayals. And today, you're about to feel the heat of it. The city is buzzing with rumors. Envoys have arrived. Strangers in feathered cloaks, their hair braided differently, their speech just a shade off. They bring gifts, cacao beans, jade beads, finely painted pottery. But gifts aren't just gifts here. They're moves, pieces, in a game of prestige and dominance. Mainstream fact: Maya kings weren't just rulers. They were Ajawab, divine lords, taught to stand as mediators between gods and people. Their authority rested not only on military power, but also on their ability to stage massive rituals, build monuments, and maintain trade alliances. Without visible proof of their connection to the divine, their power could unravel. Quirky detail: rulers often carried titles like Holy Lord of the Sky Place, or He of the Sun-Faced Throne. Some even went so far as to add the names of powerful animals, jaguar, eagle, shark, into their official names, flexing cosmic branding centuries before sports teams figured it out. Imagine going down in history as Supreme Lord, Fire Macaw, Jaguar of the East. Catchy. The scholarly debate: how centralized was Maya politics? Some argue these kingdoms were independent city-states, each with its own king and orbit of allies. Others suggest loose regional hegemonies, where one powerful city, like Tikal or Calakmul, could dominate whole swaths of territory through war, diplomacy, or marriage ties. Archaeologists still piece together inscriptions, trying to tell whether this was closer to Renaissance Italy, with fractious city-states, or a patchwork empire. Today, you watch as two rival rulers meet in the plaza. Your king stands tall, feathered headdress blazing like a green and red sunburst. Across from him, the visiting lord bows slightly, just enough to be polite, but not too much. His own feathers, longer and tipped with quetzal green, sway with every movement. Both men know what this is: a performance. The air hums with expectation. Nobles line the plaza edges, whispering about tribute and alliances. Merchants crane their necks, because politics means trade, and trade means profit. Even the farmers, dusty from dawn work, shuffle in, curious to see which way the wind of power is blowing. The gifts are laid out. Cacao beans gleam like polished wood in woven baskets. Jade glimmers in the morning sun. A roll of bark paper codex, painted with colorful glyphs, is presented like a sacred text. Each item is not just wealth, it's a statement. We have resources. We have gods on our side. We matter. Your king responds in kind. A warrior steps forward, lifting a carved obsidian blade, its edges sharper than steel. Another brings textiles dyed in impossible shades of red and blue. A final gift is revealed: a live jaguar cub, spotted and snarling, its eyes like liquid gold. The crowd gasps. What better symbol of royal power than a living embodiment of the jungle's might? But beneath the beauty, there's tension. Envoys are watching every gesture, every flicker of the eyes. Was the bow too shallow? Was the jade too small? Did someone blink first? The priests chant blessings, and the rulers clasp hands briefly, though their fingers barely touch, as if afraid true contact might give something away. The moment passes, and the plaza exhales. For now, the peace holds. Later, as night settles in, you overhear the gossip. Some say the visiting lord has come seeking marriage ties to bind his bloodline to yours, ensuring peace through shared children. Others mutter that war may come instead, the jaguar cub a veiled challenge. We are hunters and you are prey. Politics here isn't written in laws or parliaments. It's carved into stelae, staged in plazas, and whispered in smoky rooms. It's marriages and feasts, tribute and raids, gifts and insults. And you, standing in the flickering torchlight, realize the drums that pound for rituals also pound for politics. The same smoke that rises for the gods also cloaks the ambitions of kings. For tomorrow may bring trade, or it may bring war. In the Maya world, the line between the two is as thin as a quetzal feather. Morning again. The city smells of wood smoke and tortillas. But today, it also smells of something sharper. War paint, red ochre smeared across cheeks. Black charcoal streaks over forearms. Warriors gather in the plaza, their bodies painted with jaguar spots or serpent coils. Their hair tied high, feathers trembling like fire. Because politics may be staged in plazas, but when words break down, there's only one path left. War. Mainstream fact. The Maya fought not only for territory, but also for people. Captives were vital, whether for sacrifice and rituals, for forced labor, or for prestige. Taken high-ranking captives, rival nobles, or even rival kings was the ultimate prize, displayed proudly on stelae and murals. A king wasn't just a ruler. He was a hunter of men. Quirky detail. Maya warriors carried wooden clubs, studded with obsidian blades, called macuahuitl. These things could cut as sharply as a scalpel. Spanish conquistadors later said they could slice a horse's head clean off. But warriors often carried whistles, carved into animal shapes too. Imagine charging into battle, obsidian blade in one hand, and blowing a shrill jaguar roar whistle with the other. Terrifying and a little theatrical. The scholarly debate. Were these wars meant to fully conquer and rule cities? Or were they more like ritualized raids to prove strength and capture elites? Some evidence suggests that while massive conflicts happened, like Tikal versus Calakmul, many battles were about prestige, blood sport, and cosmic symbolism more than empire building. Others argue that at times, Maya warfare absolutely shifted into campaigns of expansion and subjugation. The truth may be somewhere in between. You watch as warriors march out of the city. The ground trembles with each step of leather-sandaled feet. Drums thunder, shells blare, and incense smoke trails behind like a cloud of spirits. The ruler himself appears, headdress towering, his face stern. This isn't just politics anymore. It's theater for the gods. Hours later, you find yourself near the edge of the jungle battlefield. The air is thick, humid, alive with tension. Warriors crouch among trees, obsidian blades glinting in shafts of sun. Opposite them, the rival city's warriors paint the earth with their own colors: yellow, green, deep red, shouting challenges across the clearing. The drums stop. Silence drops like a blade. Then the charge. Feet pound. Whistles scream. Spears arc through the air. Obsidian tips catching the light. The clash is chaos. Obsidian slicing through wood shields. Warriors grappling. Feathers ripped loose. Cries echoing through the trees. You see one fighter grab an enemy, wrench him down, and bind his arms. He doesn't kill him. Not yet. Captives are worth more alive than dead. Hours blur together. The battle sways back and forth, like the tide. Finally, your side surges ahead, the rival warriors breaking into retreat. Cries of victory rise, mixed with the groans of the captured. The prisoners, stripped of their finery, are led back bound with rope, their faces painted in shameful blues. Back in the city, the plaza transforms again, not into a marketplace, not into a council chamber, but into a stage of triumph. Captives kneel before the king, and the crowd roars approval. Children point, merchants cheer. Priests prepare incense, because this victory belongs not only to the king, but to the gods. Later that night, a ritual unfolds. A noble captive, perhaps even a prince of the rival city, is chosen for sacrifice. He is painted, adorned with feathers, his fate sealed. The drums beat low, steady, almost like a heartbeat. Torches crackle. You can't look away as the blade rises, obsidian shimmering. For the Maya, this isn't cruelty, it's cosmic duty. Blood fuels the gods, keeps the sun moving, keeps maize growing. The king raises the offering high, and the people cry out, voices mixing with smoke and flame. In their eyes, the world has been renewed, and you feel the duality, horror at the blade, awe at the spectacle. For in the Maya world, war isn't just about land. It's about balance, gods, and the endless cycle of power and sacrifice. Dawn again. This one feels heavier, as if the world itself knows it has entered its last chapters. The streets of the city are quieter now. Some houses stand abandoned, weeds climbing their doorways. Murals fade, colors peeling under relentless rain and sun. A sense of exhaustion hums in the air. A civilization carrying too many burdens at once. Mainstream fact: by the end of the classic period, many of the great Maya cities had been abandoned. Between the 8th and 10th centuries, monumental construction slowed and then stopped. Kings were toppled, dynasties collapsed, and plazas, once crowded with merchants and priests, fell silent. This wasn't one event, but a slow unraveling, sometimes called the Maya collapse. Quirky detail: even as kings fell and pyramids crumbled, ordinary Maya life carried on. Farmers still planted maize. Potters still made bowls. Children still played with toys shaped like dogs on wheels. Collapse didn't mean disappearance. It meant the end of one political order, while daily life quietly adapted and survived. The scholarly debate: why did the Maya collapse? Some point to severe droughts. Tree ring data shows long dry spells that would have devastated crops. Others argue it was political overstretch. Too many wars, too many captives, too much ritual pressure. Still others suggest environmental damage, deforestation, soil exhaustion, the weight of cities outstripping their land's ability to sustain them. Most likely, it was all of these at once. Climate, war, politics, and ecology weaving together into an unstoppable decline. You walk through a plaza where once thousands gathered. The stelae still stand, but their carvings are weather-worn, kings' faces blurred into the stone. The ball court is cracked, vines curling along its edges. A single bird calls, its song echoing off walls that once rang with drums and cheers. The king is gone. The nobles are scattered. Priests still light incense, but fewer people come to watch. The great theater of power has lost its audience. One evening, you sit on a crumbled temple step, watching the sun bleed into the horizon. Smoke rises from a few scattered hearts in the city, but most roofs are dark. You hear whispers. Families are leaving, migrating north or deeper into the lowlands, carrying only what they can. The city that once pulsed with life is hollowing out, and yet not everything ends. Far to the north, new Maya cities, like Chichen Itza, are rising. Traders still walk the jungle paths, carrying cacao and jade. The Maya story doesn't vanish. It shifts, adapts, flows into new forms. Centuries later, the Spanish will arrive. They'll find not a vanished people, but millions of Maya farmers, artisans, scribes, and priests. Maya languages will still be spoken. Maya gods will still be honored, sometimes hidden beneath Catholic saints. The resilience will endure far longer than the kings who thought themselves eternal. As night deepens, you realize you've walked with this world through its birth, its glory, its wars, and its slow unraveling. You've seen plazas filled with laughter and plazas filled with captives. You've tasted cacao, heard obsidian whistle, shrieks in battle, smelled copal incense curling skyward. And now you watch the stars overhead, the same constellations that Maya astronomers tracked with such precision, the same lights that guided farmers when to plant, kings when to wage war, priests when to bleed for the gods. The sky hasn't collapsed. The stars remain, just as the people remain. The drums are gone. The feathers are scattered. The stones crumble. But the story of the Maya, echoes on. Your eyes grow heavy. The night jungle hums softly. Time itself feels like it's breathing with you. Sleep comes, not as an ending, but as part of the endless cycle. Take a deep breath. Let it out slowly. You've just journeyed across centuries, walked through plazas that once rang with drums, and stood beneath stars that guided kings and farmers alike. Now, there's nothing more you need to do. The story has been told, and the echoes of the Maya world can rest quietly in your thoughts. Picture yourself lying on warm stone, the last heat of the day fading beneath your back. Above you, the jungle sky stretches wide, filled with pinpricks of light. The same stars the Maya watched, the same constellations they traced with care. Imagine each star as a lantern, gently swaying, guiding you toward rest. Your breath becomes slower, steadier. With each inhale, you gather calm. With each exhale, you let go of noise, of thought, of the day's weight. The sounds of the jungle fade into a lullaby. The hum of insects, the soft rustle of leaves, the distant call of an owl, all of it weaving together, not to keep you awake, but to remind you that the world moves gently forward, even as you drift into stillness. In the distance, the great cities crumble into silence, but around you, the air is safe, soft, and calm. You are not in the weight of history now. You are simply here, resting, breathing, ready to surrender to sleep. Let your body grow heavier with each breath, like stones settling into the earth. Let your thoughts drift further away, like smoke curling upward until it dissolves into the night. The story is complete. The journey is finished. You can let it go now. Close your eyes, breathe deep, and let sleep take you gently, the way night always has. Sweet dreams.